Over the next 7 weeks, we're going to be looking at mature ways of living leading up to the summer time together. The 10 Commandments are given to us in the Old Testament, and they're kind of a low benchmark. They're a low benchmark for the Jewish people and for us as Christians of how to live. They're kind of the minimum. Don't murder is kind of a moral prerequisite we'd all sign up to, wouldn't we? Some of us feel that murder is wrong in the room. I hope you said yes online. I want to give us some things that maybe over the next 7 weeks lift us to a higher place and a challenge to deeper maturity in Christ. I want this to be more than my revision for my exams when I did my A-levels. I did the bare minimum for my A-levels. I revised one session for 3 A-levels, 5 hours in the garden whilst sunbathing. I revised one essay in history for 5 hours. I did history A-level, and every month we had an exam, and I failed every single exam for 2 years. And before the A-level exam, the school said, we're not entering Neil in this, we think it's a waste of school money, the £18.75 that you had to pay. They said to my mum and dad, if you want to pay, then you can. So my parents paid, I did my 5 hours revision, the essay I revised came up word for word, I wrote it and I got an E. I passed. So the £18.75 came back to me, which I forgot to give back to my parents and kept for myself. My mum's on holiday at the moment, so she can't do anything. In RE, I got a U, ungraded. I didn't mention that when I went to Spurgeon's College for my interview. And in art, I got a D. My art teacher was livid. He said, you should have got at least a B. He was a grumpy guy, Mr. Ross, who used to sit in our art class and smoke his cigars. And he said to me, Neil, you come in whenever you want and I will make you a coffee and we can talk, but don't talk to me about that Christian stuff. Okay, Mr. Ross. And I would often go in there. He'd make me a coffee, he'd smoke his cigars, and I would paint and I would draw. And then when I was coming towards the end of my A-levels, he looked at me and he went, you do pray for me, don't you? I said, yes, Mr. Ross. And I did. I'm grateful for Mr. Ross and the freedom I had when I did the bare minimum at school for my A-levels. I'm so glad my children follow their mum's example and not mine when it comes to education. Jesus wants more for us than the bare minimum when it comes to Christian living. Not just, well, I didn't murder anyone this week, that's okay. Isn't it? I think he wants a deeper maturity for us. In a world where murder, whether physical or by words and slander, is extremely palatable these days, Jesus wants us to lift our voices, our lives, our actions higher. I am inspired in this series unapologetically by a book called Sacred Fire by Ronald Rolheiser, and I strongly recommend it to you as your summer read. In the book, he tells the story of when he was in hospital and he was extremely unwell and he was in there for a long time, and there was a truck driver in next to him who was also seriously ill. And he would call out in pain in that low humming voice that everyone on the ward could hear, that would wake you up in the middle of the night. And a nurse came in to give him a late night injection of painkillers. And the truck driver looked at her and said, I really appreciate you doing this for me. Oh, no need. I'm only doing my job, she said. Man, it's nobody's job to take care of me. So when you do this for me, I need to say thanks. Here was a man lying in bed in near continual pain who had gratitude. A mature Christian is fueled with gratitude. Ronald Rolheiser says, gratitude is the basis of all holiness. The holiest person you know is the most grateful person you know. I love being around grateful people. They lift me higher. They give me a waft of hope. There's a sincerity in them that I'm not waiting for them to try and catch me out and make me look stupid. They're grateful for the life they have. One dictionary definition of gratitude is the quality of being thankful, readiness to show appreciation for and to return kindness. It's thanking someone when they are kind to you. It's nothing worse than giving someone a compliment, is there? And they say, oh no, it's okay. I heard of one person who went up to a violinist after a worship service and said, your violin playing was absolutely amazing. Thank you so much. And she said to the person, oh, it wasn't me, it was the Lord. And the person said, no, it wasn't that good. Part of gratitude is learning to accept compliments, being comfortable within our own skin with the gifts and skills that God has given us that we use around others. Gratitude is the foundation of love. If our love and service, I think this quote is brilliant. If you forget everything else, please remember this. If our love and service of others does not begin in gratitude, we end up carrying people's crosses and sending them the bill. Well, I'm helping you out because I have to, but really I'm bearing a grudge. I've got a friend and he keeps notes. I don't know if he still does it. 10 years ago he did. He would keep notes of every single thing people owed him on his phone. This was in the old days of clunky phones when you used to have to open up stuff. And I can remember being with him and him actually writing down 37p on his phone because I owed him that for a pack of crisps. And I said, Nick, I'm never paying you that back now you put it in your phone. This is a challenge. Gratitude is not sending people the bill when you do something kind for them. I remember at our first church, we had a football club and we'd play on a Tuesday and a Saturday. And when I was leaving after 5 years there, one of the guys, as we were sat round the pub, said, you owe me £5. I said, do I? He went, yeah, I lent it to you 3 years ago. I said, oh, I forgot. Sorry, why didn't you just ask me for it? Well, I am now. I thought, chill out, mate. Ask me at the time. Don't make me pay the bill for 3 years because of something. I had a lady come to me at my last church and she said, I need to see you. She said, you let me down 3 years ago in 3 ways. And she gave me the specific ways. And she said the first one, I thought, oh yeah, I did. She said the second one, I thought, oh yeah, I did. And she said the third one, I thought, oh yeah, she's got a full house there. And I said to her, I am really sorry. I dropped the ball with you all 3 of those times and I apologise. How can we move forward? I remember her body went rigid. She didn't want to move forward. She wanted to punish, to make me feel small, to get out her anger and her bitterness at expense of me, making sure that I would pay the bill. We never did move forward because she never wanted to. I would have loved to. I was in a good moment on that day. Sometimes I'm as bitter as the next person. In Luke 17, Jesus shares a parable with his disciples. Suppose one of you has a servant ploughing or looking after the sheep. Will he say to the servant when he comes in from the field, come along now and sit down to eat? Won't he rather say, prepare my supper, get yourself ready and wait on me while I eat and drink. After that, you may eat and drink. Will he thank the servant because he did what he was told to do? So you also, when you have done everything that you were told to do, should say, we are unworthy servants. We have only done our duty. Jesus here is talking to his disciples, his closest followers. And on the surface, I think this parable sounds awful, a bit uncaring. As the servant has done a double duty, they've worked in the field and now they've got to work in the house as well. But this is the nature of a servant's role. You don't sit at the table with the master and eat. You work in the field and then you cook the food and you serve your master. It doesn't matter how long you've worked as a servant, you can't boast about it or ask for personal favours. I think Jesus here is drawing a distinction between what comes to us by right, what we should morally be allowed, as opposed to what comes to us as a gift. If we were only given what God owed us, we would live like the servants described in this parable. But we are given so much more. So much more. Do you remember when you made a friend at school or at work or at church? Can I encourage you to close your eyes and not go to sleep and just think of a friend you made at school or at work or at church and how they've been part of your life, how they've been with you in the high moments, how they've been with you when life stinks and is awful. How you knew you could pick up the phone to them, whatever time of night it was, and they would answer. The time they gave you that tough word that you knew in your soul you needed to hear. The time you were crying and they just put their arm around you and said, I'm with you. Open your eyes if you want to. Is it good to remember them? Can take them for granted. Can you? Maybe when this service is over, send them a message, write them a letter, phone them and just say thank you for being that friend to me all these years, all these months, or a new friend that I've discovered recently. Jesus in John 15 looks the disciples square in the eye and he says, I no longer call you servants, because a servant does not know his master's business. Instead, I have called you friends. For everything that I learned from my Father, I have made known to you. We are Jesus' friends. Jesus walked across the playground of eternity to ask you if you wanted to play ball. Jesus walked across the eternity of the office space to make a coffee to put on your desk and say, do you want to catch up after work? Jesus, as bread and wine was shared in a communion service, with his scar-stained hands, passed it to you and said, this is my body given for you. Jesus is our friend. When we've got it all together and when we've completely screwed it up, Jesus is our friend. A massive part of our daily task is to recognise that our friend Jesus gives us so many things that we can be thankful for. The highest compliment we can give a gift giver is to enjoy the gift thoroughly. This last Christmas, when we got home from the Christmas Day service, we opened our Christmas presents, and right at the bottom of my stocking, which is the biggest one out of all 5 of them, I reached in and there was a little note in there for me. And there were loads of notes that sent me all round our house with clues on them, looking for different things. And then when I found the next note, I'd go on to the next one. And we're going to watch now when I find the final piece of the puzzle, literally. How do I get this one? He's manic. Quick, cut it. Right. Yeah! That'll be happy. Yes! Look at... That was the Jaws Lego set. that I begged my family for months. Joe had bought it months before I was even begging for it. When I went to see Noah at Manchester University, I said, let's go to the Lego shop because I bet they've got the Jaws Lego set in there. And we went in and I said, take a photo of me with a really sad face and send it to the family, which they did. And the whole family came back with, forget it, it's a waste of money. It's a toy, it's for kids, it's not for you, blah, 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 blah. And then for 3 nights over Christmas period, we built the Jaws Lego set. I had a Jaws cap that I'd been bought for Christmas as well. At all times, one of us had to wear the cap while we were making the Jaws Lego, and we had the Jaws themed soundtrack, the luxury deluxe version, playing one in my ear and one in the ear of the other person that was doing it with me continuously. Noah and I were doing it right at the end, and we wanted the final piece of music where Police Chief Brodie and Matt Hooper come onto the seashore and get safe again. And so it was taking longer than we were, so we listened to this track of music 7 times in a row so that when we put the last piece of Lego onto it, it was done. I was thinking of bringing it in from my study and having it here on the stage. I was umming and erring, flipping and flopping, and I thought, if one kid after church comes and touches it and breaks it, I will probably break them, and then I will lose my job. It's not worth the risk. There's already one child in the church that keeps messing about with it, a little Scottish boy called Ryan Smith, who comes into my study and takes some of the actors. He put Police Chief Brodie in the mouth of the shark 2 weeks ago. I lost the plot. And I strode into his office and I said, what are you doing? And he went, what? He's the worst actor when it comes to lying. Forget his other job. Let's be grateful. Neil, you are an idiot. Not because of the Lego, but because you don't know the life I'm living. It's really easy for you to stand up there with your wet sermons and tell me to be grateful, but you do not walk in my shoes. You don't know how long I spend in the doctor's waiting room. You don't know how low my bank account is. You don't know the storms raging in my head. If I could just have one night's sleep with that child that keeps me awake all the time, I would grab it. Neil, you do not understand. You are an idiot. Maybe. Maybe. But gratefulness should be our default and our foundation. Because sometimes when we're in the thick of the mess and it feels like we're walking through treacle, to be grateful about what God has done, to provide hope for what God might do, keeps us going. They always taught the Jewish people about the God of Abraham, Isaac and Jacob. Why? Because they're always looking back to what God has done to remind them that God still might do in their lives. Can I encourage you, if you're struggling with gratitude, to go outside and grab 60 seconds of silence and then just to read this psalm, Psalm 8. God, brilliant Lord, yours is a household name. Nursing infants gurgle choruses about you. Toddlers shout the songs that drown out enemy talk and silence atheist babble. I look up at your macro skies, dark and enormous, your handmade sky jewellery, moon and stars mounted in their settings. Then I look at my micro self and wonder, why do you bother with us? Why take a second look our way? Yet we've so narrowly missed being gods. Bright with Eden's dawn light, you put us in charge of your handcrafted world, repeated to us your Genesis charge, made us stewards of sheep and cattle, even animals out in the wild. Birds flying and fish swimming, whales singing in the ocean's deep. God, brilliant Lord, your name echoes around the world. And take 60 seconds to be grateful for all the things that we have. Johnny Henley was the Tonbridge Angels goalkeeper for 7 seasons. He and his dad have said I can share this story. I actually had 10 days of seclusion in COVID. Do you remember those times when if you physically touched anyone who had COVID, you had to stay away from everyone else? And before every game that Tonbridge Angels have, I would stand next to him and he would be sat down, this 6'4" beast. And at the end of the manager's team talk, I would always flick his right ear and then rub his bald patch. And I did it in COVID without thinking. And then he had COVID and I had to stay in seclusion. My mum said, "Why did you touch him?" I said, "I don't know, I just do. It's habit. It's what I do." As COVID came to an end, I got a missed call from him at about 6:30 in the morning. I returned the call and he said, "Neil, my dad's had a stroke. I found him on the floor in his house. Can you pray?" I said, "Of course." He said, "Neil, it's serious." His dad was a Christian guy who used to put on a meal down at the club for everyone who was a volunteer and would always ask me to pray and then give me a free meal. I'll take that deal every day of the week. Johnny phoned me later in the day and he said, "It's not looking good at all. I wonder if you should come and see my dad." It was in Guildford. I said, "I'll come now." He said, "Actually, on second thoughts, if he's conscious and he'll see you, he'll know why you're coming and it might tip him towards the end even more. Don't worry." Next day he phoned and said, "Can I come and see you?" I said, "Of course you can." And he came and he stood in here like a little kid as Mike Sanderson, just outside there, welcomed him in. And I came up from my study and I took this 6'4" beast with trembling lips like a toddler down to my study. And rather than saying anything, I just held him. And he cried. He said, "Neil, the best case scenario for someone who's had the type of stroke my dad had is a woman in her 30s and all she can do now is move one finger." I said, "Johnny, I'll pray for your dad every day. I will pray for him until he gets better or dies or I die." And I did. It's great to be here 2 years later for a wedding service of Johnny Henley's brother, and Johnny Henley's dad was out there with about 30 of us on a frame, snot coming out of his nose, and I was told all he does is cry, a side effect of the stroke, so you can just treat him as you will. And as they started the vows, he began to sob, and I said, "John," that's his dad's name, "get a grip." And he laughed and stopped crying. And then about a year and a half ago, I travelled to a forest where Johnny's other brother was getting married. And his dad walked up to me, he shook my hand, he said, "Hi Neil, really good to see you. Thanks for doing this wedding. Only one more after this, and then we're all done." And I said, "That's if Johnny actually pops the question to his girlfriend." As I was driving back, rain pouring down on the M25, windscreen wipers going like this, I thanked God that in the mystery of life, this man was still alive. After Johnny stopped crying in my study, he sat down on my couch and he said in a frustrated tone, "Neil, I am so entitled, 30-year-old man. I just take everything for granted. I'm so entitled, and I want to live a different life." I noticed after that football didn't seem quite so important to him. That he would come in at half-time, look at me and say, "I should have saved that goal, shouldn't I? Yeah, Johnny, I could have saved that one. Fair enough." And that his life had been taken onto a higher plane where he wanted to be a decent man, a loving father, and a caring son over and above being a goalkeeper. I think he was moving into a realm of gratefulness, a deeper life than he'd experienced before. A mature Christian is grateful for and enjoys the gifts of life.